Eileen.
Welcome. Welcome subcommittee members and members of the public to the September 11th, 2024 Governor's Workforce Development Board Strategic Planning Subcommittee meeting. For the record, my name is Nancy Olson, Chair of the Strategic Planning Subcommittee. Katie, will you please take roll call and confirm a quorum and verify posting?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so first, for roll, we have Chair Olson.
Here.
Thank you. We have Vice Chair Estepona.
Here.
Thank you. We have Drazen Elez.
Present.
Thank you. We have Brett Miller.
Here.
Thank you. We have Milt Stewart.
Me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
barely.
Sorry.
Great. Thank you. We have Michael Yoder.
Here.
Thank you. And then for last, we have Michael Bolgnini. Okay, and then for our non-voting members, we have Ariana Florence.
And Ariana will be unable to join today.
Okay, we have Robert Fink.
Here.
Thank you. We have Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner. Don't see her. And then we had a pre-notified absence for Dave Schmidt. So, Ms. Chair, Katie Gilbertson, Governor's Office, Workforce Innovation. For the record, I hereby affirm that this September 11th, 2024 Governor's Workforce Development Board meeting has reached a quorum. Further, from the agenda and notice for this meeting were properly posted pursuant to Nevada's open meeting law, NRS 241020.
Thank you. Before we proceed, I would kindly request that anyone who speaks today identify yourself for the record. Continuing to agenda item number 4, public comments. Members of the public are invited to provide comments at this time. No action may be taken on any matters during public comments until the matter itself has been included on an agenda as an item for possible action. Do we have any public comments on Zoom? It looks as
Ashley Martinez.
yes, we've got Ashley Martinez.
Bolanini joined as well.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Martinez. Spelled just traditional spelling, ASHLEYMARTINEZ. For the record, I'm a regional representative for the Office of U.S. Senator Jackie Rosen. I just recently took over the workforce development issue area. I also work on various issues relating to economic development, some of our chambers of commerce, small businesses, our minority communities, and various other issues in the Northern Nevada area. I just wanted to introduce myself, and I plan on attending more of these subcommittee meetings and general workforce development board meetings. So a pleasure to meet you all and excited to see all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you and welcome. Do we have any public comments? Any other public comments on Zoom? Any on the telephone? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 5. Is there any discussion before I call for a motion to approve the March 6, 2024 Strategic Planning Subcommittee meeting minutes? Okay, hearing no further discussion, I call for a motion to approve the March 6, 2024 Strategic Planning Subcommittee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Edward Estepona for the record, so move.
Thank you, Edward.
Bolanini for the record. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, let the record reflect that the motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 6 for discussion and information only. I'd like to lead us in an update on the strategic plan and looking forward to implementation. So most of you, I believe, have been in presentations for the strategic plan. The strategic plan was to take the overarching goals in the state plan and turn that into, or at least partially turn that into SMART goals, goals that could then be tracked and determined the success of meeting those goals for implementation throughout the system. So if I could, Katie, can I share my screen?
I believe so. Go ahead and
Okay.
try.
Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the work of the Strategic Planning Committee resulted in the 3 goals that do align with or at least represent the goals that were in the state plan. The first one being population, looking at the underserved, and by underserved, it means that the numbers coming into the career hubs, adult education, etc., do not necessarily represent the numbers in the communities. So it's not that of the number we serve, it's not that we underserve based on the total number of people that we serve, if that makes any sense. So looking at those who have a low labor force participation or high unemployment rates. And then goal 2, engagement. And that is simply put, it's getting the word out as far as what the workforce system can do for businesses within Nevada. And then alignment, and that is, I think, where those of us that work for the state can have the most impact, and that is that we make sure that we are not duplicating services, that we are fulfilling the tenets of WIOA when it comes to braiding funding, co-enrollment between titles, etc. And then Katie could more easily explain this, but this was a roadmap of breaking down the first goal of population. And then they simplified that by strategies. So strategy 1, awareness of public workforce system to underserved communities. Strategy 2, streamlining supportive services and making it easier for individuals to obtain those supportive services. And that would include the much talked about asset mapping of the services. And then strategy 3, public and nonprofit staff and removing duplication of services. So the idea behind this is that the staff that we have would be more fully developed. And I would please ask Edward or Katie, either one, who were even more heavily involved in the development of this than I was, to please speak out and correct me or add to anything I say.
You're on track.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then the second one, engagement. Again, this is the very detailed roadmap, but it breaks down here with the strategy of making employers aware of the resources and funding opportunities that are available. And then making sure that the job training coursework meets and aligns with employer needs. So obviously, that would include the education providers, including adult education, but certainly even just starting at adult education and K-12. And then the third one, alignment. The strategies, first to identify the services provided. So I think that kind of ties back to somewhat to the asset mapping. But it's basically, can we come up with a one-pager that would break down titles 1 through 4 and DWSS as far as the services we provide in a very simplified manner. And then the second strategy would be to, in looking at those services, identify the gaps that are shown through both the asset mapping and developing a one-pager. And then developing a dashboard. Now this is something that I think needs to be brought up and discussed further with those of us that are involved in the state longitudinal data system. Because there are dashboards through that system. And so if we look at duplication of effort, I think we need to be careful as far as a completely separate dashboard. Just because we could very well end up duplicating effort there. So those are the 3 primary goals and the strategies around those goals that have come out of their strategic plan. The time frame, which I think can, in some cases, be a little ambitious. For instance, December 2024, the application referral system, those of us that have worked on that issue realize that a contract would have to be, at least a minimum of 1 contract would have to be in place, and that could take a good 6 months. So Edward, I see your hand.
Yeah, Edward, I just want to, for the record, I'm going back to that last slide that you had prior to this when you were talking about specifically the dashboard. In my mind, I've tried to wrap my brain around this and what this is. It's like, again, I don't think the purpose of this is to create any duplication, but rather to create a unification, if anything. And the unification being, I think it becomes a microsite I'll call it a microsite because that's the best thing I can describe it as, that becomes a cheat sheet that allows us to have any user that goes through it to access any of the services from all of the different titles and the different organizations. It's not meant to replicate the existing websites of these organizations, but it's meant to help navigate it faster, I think, in my mind. And if we do it, I would say we do it not with the intent of the government lens, because the government lens and the government language is very jargony, very specific to each one of the titles. And an everyday user, whether it's a job seeker or it's an employer that's looking at this, is not going to understand any of the stuff we're saying. And that's half the challenge when we're asking them to go to these titles website. Most of it is not in English, is what I would call it. It's in jargon. And my hope is that we can navigate this way. And again, this is the best way I think we can do this. It's a microsite that helps navigates the service from all the different titles. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, Nancy Olson, for the record, that was, I'm glad that you said that, because that was not exactly my understanding. I took the dashboard to be more performance-based than that. So.
And Edward S. on a record. And again, it can have some of those performance-based data in there as shortcut data that if we wanted to drill down, it could take you to the dashboard of that title per se, right? But they're just more bigger, larger global data that's across, and that could be residing on the home page of this microsite, right? So I do see, because there's a lot of unification and alignment in more than just the dashboard. It's like, if we're trying to say, oh, we want to map out all our services that we do in the state, where can we find that right now in anywhere that has everybody's service in one place? Nowhere, because everybody's very specific to their service. So again, you would need not just a dashboard, you would need a place where it says, here's all the services. Click on this link, and then boom, it takes you to the group that serves you. You can even say, click on the area. I'm in Las Vegas. Click on the service I need here. Boom, takes you to where you need to go. It's a shortcut. It's the Cliff Notes is what I'd call it. For those of us that knew what Cliff Notes were and used them heavily. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy Olson, for the record. Yes. Katie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Katie Gilbertson, for the record. I think they changed to Spark Notes when I was in high school. But I think so. I remember I used it too. Yeah, so thank you, Ed, for that. I think the distinction, right? How I imagine the strategic plan dashboard is separate from the NPower dashboard, in that the NPower ones track longitudinal, more historic kind of data. Whereas this, I think the strategic plan dashboard is supposed to be more of like a pulse, and it's going to have metrics that aren't going to be an NPower. Because like if you go to the 2 prior goals, like we're going to be tracking like with the common calendar, right? Like how many events did we have? And from those events, what happened, right? Like how many people, how successful was this hiring event or this grand opening of resource center or something. So I think, to me, the strategic plan dashboard's supposed to be more timely, and Ed's totally right. It can link to NPower. I think NPower's got its own great advantages in terms of the historical longitudinal thing. I think this one's just supposed to be, a little bit more unique. It's not all the common things that we would normally see. I would equate it to, I know you guys had the continuous improvement subcommittee a couple years ago, with the intention of, I think Dave Schmidt was working on a dashboard. It's still not there. We're supposed to go to NPower. Brett's smiling. So this is I wasn't there, but this is maybe a recreation of that in some way, but that's my distinction I see there.
Okay, Nancy Olson, for the record, thank you very much. So in looking at all this, one of the things, there it is. Okay, So and I may be missing a slide here, Katie, because I'm missing where the referral system is on here, or is it?
I think that's in the first one, population. Yeah, 3A.
Okay, here we go. Okay, thank you. So we've got develop better application and referral system. And that is something that we've been meeting about at the state level with Dieter and our office, to see what's out there in the way of, tracking systems for referrals. Because right now what's happening is, the North has a new system that they're using through Nevada Works, as Milk can fill you in. And then the South is kind of doing their own thing. And so what we are looking at the state is trying to come up with something that would be statewide. And, you know, the policies at the state level could be put in place to maintain the tracking for the referral system. So we could then measure increases and improvements in the tracking or in the referrals. Yeah, Milt.
Oh, can't hear you, Milt.
Yeah, you're muted.
How about now?
Oh, yes,
Yep.
thank you.
All right, thank you. I had to call in, I'm having some technical difficulties. So one of the, I haven't been involved in, personally, I haven't been involved in the application and referral conversations. But I guess one of the questions that I have, and some of this gets kind of muddled, right? We're approaching this from a governor's workforce development board perspective, but Dieter's actually driving the conversations around that application and tracking with partners. So part of my question then, I guess, is what resources does governor's board bring to the table to help with all of this? Because first of all, my word is aggressive as far as this timeline is concerned, and happy to help, but it's quite aggressive without additional resources and or folks to help make this happen, firstly. And then secondly, any tools or referral system, application systems or whatnot, is the intent that that's paid for through Dieter, or what does all that look like, I guess, because I'm not clear. Again, I haven't been involved in those conversations.
Yeah, Nancy Olson for the record, and you know, one of the reasons why I think the time frame of December 2024 for this is aggressive, pretty much sums it up, is that there are pieces of that we don't have answers to yet. So there have been discussions about the purchase or the leasing, whatever the case may be, of a system coming from the state level, so that the driver is statewide instead of each region. So that has been discussed. The possibility of Gov Reserve funds being used has been mentioned. Obviously, part of that depends on cost. And the systems that we're looking at range from a very reasonable, like $2,500 per user system, to, you know, a few $100,000. So it ranges greatly. And we have reviewed, I want to say 4 systems so far, including Unite Us, by the way. The Employee NV does not have this capability right now, but quoted a very high price to put it together. But there's, like I said, there's several systems out there. I'm pretty sure that it would take an RFP unless Dieter has some magical way of doing sole source, which I don't think would apply in this case. So an RFP and a contract, as we all know, or most of us know, can take several months. And then on top of that, you've got the training, you know, the implementation that comes after that. So, Edward, I see your hand up.
Edward S. for the record. Yeah, I when I looked at this schedule, knowing and understanding how layered and how government has all these processes for procurement, it is very aggressive. That doesn't mean we can't move fast in a sense of we can try to move to a certain point. I think there's a lot of things in here that it's a fact-finding mission, and just finding the data and the information is probably the most important part in this process, and then identifying when we're ready to start thinking about systems, or even like either whether we do the dashboard, the microsite, I don't care, whatever you want to call it at the end of the day, it's going to cost money to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we need to start saying, okay, let's get some ballpark numbers, just so that, again, whoever it may be at the end of the day at the state level, that's going to say, well, does this trigger an RFP and now we have to do this, or does it do this, or, you know what I mean? It's just, and that is as far as we can move on some of those things. That's the reality of that, because again, who is paying for it? If the state of Nevada is paying for it, it will trigger an RFP, especially if it's over some sort of number. Usually it's like $49,999 or something like that. So I think we need to identify, all the information so that we can get to a certain point with all of these. Like, you can almost tackle each single strategy and say, let's put a small mini group in charge of each strategy. And let's just say, here's what we have. Here's all the information. And this didn't cost us any money to get to this point. Here's where the hangups are. And it may cost us money. And again, maybe at that point also address new timelines based on finding that new pieces of information that makes sense. My brain is trying to figure out, well, you can overwhelm yourself thinking how you're going to do this collectively, or you can take bite-sized pieces out of it. And so I'm just suggesting, as we're going through this, that we may take those bite-sized pieces and just, there's a lot of people in this group, and I think within that we can break up into small groups and kind of come back with some sort of things behind the scenes. And I know that that's what we had to do to some degree to do the shortcut, or this short strategic plan that we've got right now based off of the 300 whatever page document, the bigger state document. I know that's how we were able to cut it up and move faster. So I'm going to suggest we do something like that to keep it going. And again, I'm going to treat all of these deadlines here as guardrails that we're going to try, but no guarantees.
Yeah, Nancy Olson for the record, thank you. And Drawson, I see your hand, but before, one thing, if I might, Edward, I was actually thinking the exact same thing as far as working groups for implementation purposes. So, and Drawson?
Thank you, Nisa. It's Drazen Ellis for the record. So I guess I just wanted to add to some of that, what you guys were talking about. I do agree with you that this is a great plan. I guess the part maybe that kind of trips up on timelines really has to do maybe with how defined the goal is essentially, because you're right that right now we don't have any, these teams wouldn't have any resources to do a lot of work, and so there's no dedicated resources to that. So you're right, as if they kind of at least develop a plan, because you're right that Edward, that there's really no way to think about all these different goals that we're trying to accomplish and what all will take to get them done, because it really needs a lot more research and may take a bunch more steps. So once that kind of maybe plan is established, the funding wouldn't even just be as easy as essentially publishing an RFP, because it would also have to do with what type of budgets those agencies have that are already committed. All of the budgets are kind of written for 2 years out. So if you're asking for additional funds, that now requires us to submit a work program or request for amendment to the budget. You have to identify where the funds are going to come from. If you're asking for some form of general fund, emergency general fund, there's obviously political kind of implications behind that. So it can just add a lot to the timelines, and that's why sometimes some projects, as amazing as they seem, don't sometimes get done, because difficult to identify, I think, the resources in these situations. So I think for a lot of these goals, it's, a lot of the folks that we have on there under the kind of execution teams, we would really need to get their buy-in to get some of this done. Because even if, would the director of theater be interested in asking for the money for the application system? Possibly. I'm not going to speak on his behalf, but we really, as far as a lot of these goals, if it's going to require agencies resources, we may need to kind of get the buy-in from them to make sure that they are also in agreement. And it's one example would be the why Did You Know campaign. I think that's a great idea, but also I don't know what other agencies, like whether we can kind of coordinate all of them to do this from day one. Because I know for us, we start we would have a plan for a year as far as social media, so we already would have plans that we would try to execute in January. Doesn't mean that we can implement this during that time, but again, they would require conversations with everybody and to even know whether they have resources for their campaign as well. So in any case, I just wanted to kind of put a lot of those things out there that some of this we need maybe it'll just restructure as far as more exploration activities to come up with the goals and suggestions as to how we can move forward.
Nancy Olson, for the record, I appreciate you pointing out the fact that some of the execution team are not represented here, not represented on the board, and have all we can do is go to them and say, please, because in some cases there's not anything that we can say or do to say you need to do this or you have to do this. Certainly not you have to do this. And Katie, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Katie Gilbertson, for the record. So I appreciate this dialogue, and that's why we made these execution teams, was to kind of leave the nuts and bolts to the people that know this best, right? I think in terms of the timeline, the sequencing of it was based off of things that already seemed like they were in motion, so to say. So like the application and referral system, when you're looking at all these items, like we knew that at least there was a group already looking at it, and you're totally right. Maybe it doesn't need to be bought and implemented and whatever and trained by December, but I think Ed's right with the checkpoint. It's a guardrail, because when Scott and I took this to the governor's office, they were kind of like, yeah, like this is great, but how do I know it's going to get done? And so I think that, and that's fair, right? So I think that was the whole reason for, the aggressive timeline. It doesn't need to be done by then, but I think in terms of just the ordering of them, we did things that seemed either already in the motion in terms of prioritization, or things that could probably at least get done. We can make the Did You Know campaign materials. Doesn't mean that they need to be, on every billboard in every city, but at least that if they're made, that's a step. And also things that might require money too, because if you're going into legislative session, that was another thought, especially with Scott, since he knew that really well. But I think, yeah, that was kind of the governor's office concern, was how do you know it's going to get done? That's why we made an aggressive timeline. That's also why we gave ourselves, it's a 3-year plan. If you look there, it's a 3-year plan from June 2024. So we have a whole extra year. We did that on purpose too, to kind of say, hey, maybe half of them get done by the time that they're supposed to. Then we can reassess as we go with, the expertise of these execution teams to readjust this timeline. It's not binding. It's, I think, just to get something on paper and put the intention there to show the governor, hey, this governor's workforce development board is serious. And Nancy, to your point about members that aren't on the actual board, that was intentional too, because you have to kind of expand your scope of who you're working with in the workforce system, because sometimes we don't talk to those people. We don't really engage with veteran services, or we don't engage with NDOC, but they have a spot here. You know what I mean? Workforce is huge. So that was some of the, just the points mentioned before for clarification.
Thank you. Brett, I see your hand, Brett Miller.
Yeah, Brett Miller for the record. So as I look at this, so I see in the documents, it says example measurements. Okay, so does that mean we have flexibility in what we actually implement? Because I'm looking at 80% of these measurements and saying, okay, this is going to have to be some sort of manual tracking that is probably not going to end up consistent across partners, right? So then I start saying to myself, then it's a lot of work for something that maybe has little value, little added value. And I mean, that's been, I mean, kind of my heartache with this from the first time I saw it is I'm not sure that these measurements get us where we want to go. Right. And I think that's a function of the people that would actually be measuring it were not in the room.
Thank you, Brett. Nancy.
Yeah, this is Mel. So, me and I'm not trying to be difficult here, but I'm gonna say basically what I said in the governor's board meeting, which is this is all new to me, and unless in Nevada Works there was some staff that was involved in the development of this that I'm not aware of, I have a little bit of heartburn over a couple things. Number one, when I hear things like we're not doing this or we're not doing that or we're not tracking this, those generic terms, it's not true. Okay. I mean, the reality is that, and I said this during the governor's board meeting, that I think that there's a disconnect or a misunderstanding at the governor's board level around what is actually happening. And so if we develop this strategic plan based on some assumptions, which I can tell you right now, there's some assumptions baked into that, then to Brett's point, I think that we may be focusing on some areas that need a little bit of a lift, right? Versus there's nothing going on in that. I guess I think that this could have been a better document, and maybe moving forward, having conversations with some of the stakeholders, including local boards, to understand what is already happening. Because when we say, we don't talk to certain agencies, that's not true. I mean, at the one-stop centers, at the AJCs, at the employee and BS, this stuff is happening on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to make sure that we don't assume that some things aren't happening when in fact they are. We should be building upon what's already out there, including, when we see some of the execution team, seems to me that if we're going to have an execution team, that execution team needs buy-in and needs to be part of that conversation on what the strategy and what the implementation is. And I'm not trying to shoot the messenger here. This just feels a little bit disjointed to me. And I'm just wondering if we can kind of get things back on track a little bit by having some conversations around what is already happening in these areas versus assuming that there's very little to nothing happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Nancy Olson for the record, and Edward, before I recognize your hand up, I would like to say, in recognizing that this is being recorded, I would like to say that I think that in trying to meet a very quick turnaround time for the strategic plan, I think there were things that should have happened that didn't happen, as far as input was received from a lot of different sources, but then it didn't come back to key stakeholders to be involved in processing that input when it came to actually developing the strategic plan. I was involved very initially in the strategic plan, and then after that input was received, was not involved until it was presented to me as completed. So I could not agree more as far as those issues and some of the things that I think in the desire to get it published and out there, I think there were some things that were skipped as far as steps. So, and Edward, I will go ahead and
Edward Esteban for the record. I think this is how we get into the trouble of sometimes people feeling like they're being told versus they're participating. And I'm gonna take a hot minute here and take a step back. I am a guy that likes to create bridges, and the minute I sense tension in the room, which I sense some of it in this room, I like to say, how do we get harmony back so that we can get back on track? And that is my agenda, and this is what I'm going to try to do when these things happen. The way I look at this, again, these are guardrails. They are not the word of God. They're not like we're going to follow them down to a T. What I'd love to do, I think there's this perfect opportunity right now, because this is now what this has done is created great conversation in this room, which again, there's holes in this. We have identified holes already. This is one of the beautiful thing of saying, can we break these down into smaller working groups? And within this working group, when we look at the execution team, can we bring in advisory members within those teams to be part of that small working group? To have some of the conversation, discuss what is doable, what is not doable, or obstacles, basically, obstacles we have faced, whether it's budget obstacles or whether it's technology obstacles, whatever they are, address some of these, come back and report on each one so that we can keep on realigning. I see this as a working plan that we can realign with, that again, isn't the big gigantic state plan that goes to the federal government that we can't mess with, right? That is the gospel in their world. That's why when I looked at that plan, it was so big and generic, it was hard to kind of fall out of those guardrails. This is more, I think, the way I'm looking at this is it's going to actually help in the future when you have to recreate those federal plans. We're going to start creating a pathway now to get better at providing information for those federal plans based on what we're doing here. But I don't think, I just want to let everybody know, please don't get excited about it. I understand where your pains are coming from. And I understand that you guys have set resources. I don't think we're here to say, oh, give us more of the resources or bleed more. That's not, I think, the intention of this. I think the intention is there is a lot of fact-finding part of this. And I think to get things done, we need to identify what is doable and what isn't doable. And when it isn't doable, even for the data, like what measurements there's probably, my guess is, if you can get these people in the room, as Milt said, these data is probably being tracked somewhere, but nobody has defined what is it that they want and why is it that they want that number. I think that's the bigger question, the why. For those of us that don't work in this space every day, that are in the private sector, we assume things, and I think that those are all of us. We all have biases in this room. We'll make those assumptions, but I don't think we really know what the real truth is until we talk to a person who lives that every day. And that's why I have been a big supporter of constantly getting to know each one of you guys to understand your business better, so that I can have a better comprehension, so that when I'm making, when I'm thinking up things or saying things even, that I'm not just talking out of my, just talking out of somewhere where I'm making assumptions, but rather that these are facts and truths that I know them to be with you guys. So again, I think there's this opportunity. I think there was a little bit of, if I'm going to be fair about this, Ken and Hugh were very aggressive about this because they wanted to achieve something or feel like they achieved something during their tenure. And I don't blame them. This board historically has not moved. It's been a lot of stop and go, a lot of changes. And I think if we're going to go move collectively as a group this time, we need to bring everybody along and not just expect people to come along because we said so. That's just my piece. And I think that's the way I want to approach this. And I hope everybody agrees that that's probably a better way to go about this, as opposed to this is the gospel. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Olson for the record. Yeah, I think, obviously there's more in here than what this group can take on alone. So I think we need to kind of look at, what pieces of this could we have a work group, partially representing this group and partially being additional members of a work group to contribute. So I think that's one of the things that maybe we need to look at, as far as, what are the pieces that we can take that makes sense for a group to work on. And Brett, I saw your hand up first, and then Drazen.
Yeah, I just want to, Edward, I appreciate your advocacy. I see you stand as balance as a group in the GWDB, and I see you looking for real solutions, and I appreciate that. I just want to put that out there in the universe. Okay.
Thank you.
Nancy, also for the record, I would say ditto without a doubt. So, and Drazen?
Thank you, Nancy. This is Drazen. That was for the record. So definitely ditto to what Brett has said. I agree. I think, Edward, you definitely have a very balanced, and we appreciate your kind of always trying to see it from both sides of the view. And also, Nancy, I do agree with you. I think we definitely need some type of work groups that would then get invitation from the Governor's Workforce Development Board to some of these execution teams or their representatives. They kind of choose who could represent them. I don't know how many work groups that would be, whether it's 3, so that each one works on different ones or something else. But yeah, we would need to have a lot of buy-in and kind of coordination between a lot of agencies. They maybe don't coordinate. They coordinate in general, but maybe not in these particular on these type of particular issues, I guess. Because then they would kind of pair up the right people to have that discussion.
Nancy Olson for the record. Just a second here. So the agenda for today does not have an item for a vote for the work to establish work groups. My question to Katie and possibly Dag Gardner is, do we need to have that as an item to vote on? Or is it something that we can move on outside of this meeting?
Hi, Nancy, this is Katie Gilbertson for the record. So I don't think you need to vote on a work group because that's how we made the state plan. We just kind of set it up and everybody, on this committee was on that committee. So I don't think so. And just another kind of follow up to this is at the executive committee next week, we're going to have a similar conversation around the strife that, has been brought up today. More in the executive committee. And I think that's with the intention that Hugh and Ken kind of make a call on how we're gonna actually do this. So I would just say hang tight till next week, and just in legality, I don't think you need to vote on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Nancy Olson for the record. So we will definitely follow up with people as far as work groups are concerned. And I would love input on, does it make sense to have, a group working on population strategy 1, a group working on, population strategy 2, etc. Or does it make more sense to look at, each goal and each strategy and say, well, right now, this strategy is just not realistic. Let's hold off on that and work on, strategy 1 and 3, but not 2 or something to that effect. Yes, Edward.
Edward Espona for the record. I think we need to just look at this logically, each one. Again, if we're trying to do this balance effect, it's to look each one. We're not going to say, oh, here's the standard rule across the board, all strategies. I think each one we can identify, can we work on these separately for one, or do they need to be working conjunction because they tie in together so well? I think it's just establishing, going through each one and saying, well, what does this look like? And then deciding, okay, maybe we can work together and all, as opposed to individuals in specific individual action 1A and action 2A would be having 2 different groups versus 1 group. I think that's something that we can determine either in this meeting or in a following meeting, or even just on the side. What I like to do, and I think this will be better for this group moving forward, and this is just my own thought on this, is I like to throw spaghetti up in the wall rather than asking everybody. I like to throw spaghetti up the wall saying, it is not the gospel. This is just a thought. Please respond to the thought. And then based off of that, then, really decisions are made. And I think they're made faster versus leaving an open-ended question where people are like, I don't know how to respond to this. So I think that maybe even you and I, Nancy, could take a shot at this. You and I and Katie could take a shot at this and say, this is a possible way to do this, and then come back to the group and say, what do you guys think? And then we can have those discussions. And this is the other thing I wanted to say. I understand that for those in the room that are in the private sector, this is moving slow. But I promise you, having worked in both worlds with all these different organizations in these worlds, it starts out slow. But once the communication's strong, once the process and systems are strong, it starts moving way faster. And there's less people that are pissed off. There's less people that are unhappy. There's more people actually saying, hey, join the bandwagon because now we've got a great band, a great wagon to hop onto. So again, I just know this is how this is going to work. I'm a realist, and that's how I want to apply all this realism to this whole thing, because it is a lot of work, and I don't want to, I want to make sure that we are communicating clearly to people, because I've found that the miscommunication is what pisses people off.
Sure. Nancy Olson for the record. So, Brett, before I get to you, could we survey the members of this group without it being a violation of open meeting laws?
Katie Gilbertson for the record. I think as long as everybody's not responding to one another, if it comes back just to me, I think it's
Okay.
fine. And I can share it with you, but I don't think everybody can email
Okay.
in one group, so to say.
Thank you. Okay, Brett? You're muted.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
What I was going to suggest is for items that are ongoing measurements, it might be productive to just send out each of those goals or action items and ask everybody that would be required to report on this how they might look at that and measure that. And then from there, I think we might be able to look at it and say, okay, we can agree on doing it this way and reach common ground without having 20 meetings to get there.
Yeah, Nancy Olson for there. That's exactly the kind of thing that I was thinking as far as survey. We've got a new tool that I'm excited about using, that I could do, like population strategy 1. What are your thoughts on a work group working on this? How would you measure it? You know, who do you think should be involved? Kind of going through each one that way. And sending that out. And then it also, like I said, you know, fancy new tool that will actually put it together for the responses together for us. And Milt, I noticed you unmuted. Nope, okay. Okay, sounds like we have a little bit of a, you know, way path forward here. So Katie, I'll reach out to work with you on helping me with that. Okay, good. Okay. Does anyone need this document that did not receive it? Or has not been in a presentation with it?
Nancy, I can send it out after, just since
Okay.
it's a meeting. I did send out the report version of this, which is, it's all the same thing. It's just
Okay.
vertical instead of horizontal, but yeah, I can send out the PowerPoint too.
I just used the first one I found, as far
No,
as
that's great.
documents I had. So, okay,
Perfect.
all right. Okay, any comments or questions about this before we go ahead and move on? Yes, Milt.
Thanks, Nancy. I just want to be clear on one thing. I don't have any, I think that all of this is a good idea, but I hate duplication of efforts. And you know, we talk about that all the time. And I feel like there's a lot of work that I can speak to from a local board perspective that's already being done that can be leveraged as opposed to starting from scratch, if you will. And so I just want to make sure that, and that's just speaking from local boards, and if we start extrapolating that across the titles, and then if we start extrapolating that against or across the 17 partners, I think that there's a lot of work that's being done here that we can coalesce around. And so that's what I'm trying to say here is that the more that we can evaluate what's already being done and leverage that to reach the goals that we're talking about, that's what I'm looking for. And so thank you.
Nancy Olson for the record, yes, thank you. And I think, that absolutely, why reinvent the wheel? If it's already being done, let's just replicate it, let's expand it. Let's, include others, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, yeah, thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So moving on to agenda item number 7. For discussion and information only. And this says the chair will lead an update on developing a WIO informational brief. And Katie, please excuse me, because when you sent this to me, I was looking at it very quickly. I believe you mean the document that would have titles 1 through 4 and GWSS, just the activities and services very, very briefly in like a 1-page document? Or is it something else that I'm missing?
Yeah, no, you're right, Nancy.
Okay.
Katie, listen, for the record, there was a thing you said that you thought might have already been made. I did look, I couldn't find anything, but this is just something I think, again, back to Ed's point, the business members of the board have asked for this before because they don't understand what you guys do. I didn't want to call it a 1-pager because I didn't want people to say, I can't put everything in a paragraph of what I do. So that's why I didn't call it a 1-pager. It's a brief. But yeah, that's what we're talking about here.
Okay, great. So yes, what I was telling Katie was, once upon a time, I saw a document that came from another state that was a great document for a very simplified snapshot of the titles, and of course we would be adding DWSS as well. But if anybody has anything, this is again one of those things of not reinventing the wheel. But we want to come up with a brief that would achieve that goal of having a simplified document for those that don't work in our system and don't have an understanding of what we do. We know that the nuances of what we do would not be there. So again, it would be a very simplified 30,000 feet view. So anybody have the perfect document already in existence? Okay. Anyone want to volunteer to help out putting it together? Edward, thank you. You're the marketing expert. You're muted. Okay. Milt, is that volunteering?
Yeah, can you hear me? Am I on mute?
Yes. No, you're good.
So it's volunteering, and also, some of these conversations, again, and I hate to keep saying this, are being had at the local board level as well. We're having conversations with Edward right now as a local board on how do we articulate what it is the local boards are doing for the community. I know that Workforce Connections does similar things. So how do we translate that into a document or a narrative or whatever that is being asked for here? I feel a little bit of a roller coaster here. We were doing a narrative, and then we went to strictly numbers, and now we're being asked to go to some type of narrative again, which I'm fine with. We just need I'm happy to be part of that conversation. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Yeah. Edward? You're still muted.
Oh, what I was thinking about this specifically was I think we can ask each group for their short narrative for each group. And then based on that, once we received everybody, I do not have a problem at that point taking everything and putting into one document and having even my copywriters on my team to look at it and to look at it from the lens of a end user, whether it be a business partner or whether it be a job seeker. Let's start there, because I think those are who we're going to serve. We're not here to serve each other. We're to serve those groups one way or the other. And I think, again, looking at that point of view would be very helpful. And I think this is also when we start talking about even figuring out what are all the assets that we have, right? I think it does begin with each organization telling me, tell me everything that you serve and give me a laundry list. And then starting to see where the overlaps, and in the overlaps are going to be the interesting part, because that's where the discussion should be had. It should be like, okay, Milt, I notice you have it here too, but I also see that, Dieter has it here. How does that work on your end? How does it work on their end? And is it that you guys are really replicating, or you're doing two different services within that level, right? That's what's going to help us with the audit part of this. And then from there, it's easy to figure out where the gaps are, because we can start identifying the gap. So again, every organization is going to be in charge with, tell me what you do, even in a laundry list form, what it is. And if you have to define it, please define it. I mean, again, I need definition. I'm a lay person. I don't want to look at this from the lens of jargons. I want to look at it from English, like any human would, or, well, not even English. Just look at it from the lay person's point of view. Because granted, I know we're going to translate some of this to Spanish, and we're going to translate, again, when we're talking about underserved, we're going to need to determine those things down the road also, right? But for now, let's just get the information together, and then we'll begin to navigate around other things of how to get to the underserved from there.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in again, and I think I mentioned this at that retreat that we had. There is both Title I and Title III utilize Employee NV, and there's an extract called the Pearl that comes out of Employee NV that articulates what the local boards are doing. And so I say that to say that if there is, if the governor's board has a better understanding of the data that is available, that's reported through the state to the Department of Labor on a regular basis, that may help inform what it is that they're looking to see. Because the overwhelming majority of what speaking for the local boards and for Title III, the overwhelming majority of what happens is recorded and captured in Employee NV. And I take it even further, if the governor's board or if Owen has a data analyst that wants to dig into that, they can then determine what they want to see and pull it right out of Employee NV as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Okay. And I am speaking of what we all do, I'm being very self-serving and putting in the chat information or the links for 2 activities that adult education has going on next week. And I should have said Nancy Olson for the record. But speaking of what we all do, we are celebrating Nevada Adult Education and Family Literacy Week next week. And we will have a virtual open house for high school equivalency on Monday, and virtual open house for adult education and family literacy on Wednesday. So I'm being very self-serving and putting that in the chat. But I will, we'll organize putting together, the title and DWSS information, Edward, and be more than happy to send it to you, and very much appreciate the marketing view of putting it together. So,
Yep.
thank you very
Be
much.
glad to do so. Thank you.
Katie, yes, I see your hand.
Yeah, I didn't know if you saw my message. Mike Yoder had his hand up. I don't know if he wanted to still talk or not.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed it.
No worries. I just want to make sure he could talk if he wanted to.
Yes, please.
Thank you. No problem, Nancy. Mike Yoder for the record, and I just wanted to get a consensus because I'm always eager to speak up about the definition of duplication of services. So I know that I've been on many committees with the workforce boards going back about 7 years, and I know most of the time the context in which that is derived or used from the very beginning has always been the concern of duplication of services is for the client's protection. So if we have 17 titles, probably half a dozen titles or partners within the integrated system who do perform, for the most part, similar or same workforce development services for their clientele. As you know, welfare has tens of thousands of SNAP clients and probably 3,000 or 4,000 TANF clients, and those folks are in front of us every day and have been for since Bill Clinton was in office. And so we've developed process on our end. We mandatory partner of the workforce system, started actively engaging around 2016. And I know that we always try to identify which one of our partners is, we feel, the expert at performing a certain workforce development service. I know that for reentry, that FIT or Hope for Prisoners are experts on knowing what my client can do if they have background issues, what type of training will allow them to gain employment in that particular field, so those types of things. We're not going to try and become experts in that. We're going to refer to our partners. When you have a partner who has over 70 employers already that are second chance employers, we're not going to go out and try and figure out who the employers are who are second chance employers. We're going to go to our partner. But basic things like providing support services, leveraging funding for vocational training, doing the assessment on the client that's sitting in front of us, by taking them through a work keys assessment to address their academic capabilities, doing a soft skills assessment. Those are things that we do the holistic case management approach, and we care as much, if not more, about our worker, our client, than we do about industry and employers. So we definitely make our referrals when appropriate. So just wanted to, for anybody who's not in the workforce system, who's on the committee, define that for some of us, duplication of services first and foremost means I'm not going to put my client through the same assessment that my partner already put them through. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to start saying, well, this partner, and that partner shouldn't do this, and this because employee B or Dieter does it. So, but I definitely wanted to also acknowledge that we do recognize which of our partners are better at some things than we are and are happy to refer them over. But we don't want to lose our client and then they don't get the services they need because we're inundating our partner and didn't do the proper assessment to send them over in the first place. But thank you for the time. Sorry to ramble. I just always like to express that in these meetings. Thank you.
Nancy Olson for the record, and you know, Mike, I think one of the things that, we have to add when we talk about duplication of services is unnecessary duplication of services.
Absolutely.
So, Milt, saw your hand? Oh, no, okay.
No, I agree with what Mike just said, and Milt here for the record. So you'll hear me say something along the lines of, I don't believe in silos in and of themselves, but I do believe that there are organizations that are good at certain things, and we should leverage what everyone is good at, which I think is really just a variation of what Mike just said. And that's, you know, speaking for Nevada Works, that's what we try to do.
Thank you, yes. Okay. And I see Robbie Fink, thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. Nancy Olson for the record, and I'll coordinate with Katie to work with those of you that we need information from to send to Edward for him to fix up and make pretty for us. Okay. With that, I will move on to agenda item number 8. I'd like to ask subcommittee members if there is any new business that they would like to bring up.
This is Drazen Ellis for the record. So I guess one thing that I want to bring up and bring it up now, I guess, just as it may relate to some of the things that we were talking about earlier. So I reported a few months ago at the Governor's Workforce Development Board that we had gotten a grant from the Department of Education and Rehabilitation Service Administration. We were Voc Rehab applied with Department of Education to essentially get a grant of $10 million to establish a platform where all of the resources for individuals with disabilities would be pulled together, and that's then kids as young as 10 and through adulthood, as well as their support systems, would have all the resources available in one place. And essentially for us to develop that digital place along with the phone app, where from essentially elementary school on, kids and their parents and support groups would have access to what all services are available, along with their applications for those services, additional information that they need, and such. So we are currently kind of in the development process, and I think our website currently it hasn't been fully developed yet, but we at that point have had to pull about 17 different partners, disability community, to start working on this. And we believe that looking to be finished probably within the next by the end of next calendar year, so by the end of 2025, which I think will be a great resource to Nevadans that would need these services. So
Nancy Olson for the record, congratulations.
sorry, we call it Nevada Trip. So
Calling it what? I'm sorry?
Nevada Trip. So
Trip?
essentially, yeah, Trip. So the way that the website is structured, it would essentially act. It's more geared towards youth and students and youth with disabilities, and essentially it would appear as a trip through school and through different resources. So they're kind of taking this trip of a lifetime to with the end goal of employment, and us also providing all the other support resources they would need throughout that trip. And then hopefully at the end, for any kind of education experience they would want, and then leading hopefully to employment outcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other new any other members with new business? Okay. Before moving on, I would request that any member of the subcommittee who arrived late after roll call would please identify themselves at this time so you're marked present.
You had perfect attendance today, Nancy, from your voting members, so there you go.
Wow,
I know.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. That's fantastic. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9. Members of the public are invited for final comments. Do we have any final comments on Zoom? Any final comments on the telephone? Okay, hearing no further comments, I hereby move to adjourn this meeting. And I hope that as many of you as possible will join us for our virtual events next week. Thank you very much.